If you were opening the Bible for the first time and began reading Leviticus 17, you would probably want to close the book almost immediately. Because what you would see is a scene that feels deeply uncomfortable to modern readers. Someone simply slaughters an animal without bringing it to the designated place, and that act is called bloodshed. The person is even said to be cut off from the community. Instinctively, you would ask, isn't this an overreaction? Isn't this just ordinary life? Isn't it just eating meat? But God is not really talking about whether one eats meat or not. What he is addressing is something we still resist facing today. Who does life actually belong to? In that time, people naturally assumed that what they raised or hunted belonged to them. How to handle it, where to handle it, and for whom to handle it. Those were personal choices. God interrupts that assumption. He says, if you treat a life as merely your resource, instead of bringing it before me, that is not a neutral act. It is guilt for bloodshed. This is hard for us to grasp because we tend to think of sin as moral corruption, not as failing to place God at the center. But here God is unmistakably clear. The moment a person decides to deal with life on their own terms, without letting God decide, the problem has already begun. Then God says something even more confusing. He does not simply say, do not offer sacrifices carelessly. He says, the sacrifices you used to offer out in the open fields must be brought to me. In other words, the issue is not merely whether you sacrifice, but to whom you sacrifice, by what authority, and according to whose will. Because human beings are remarkably skilled at one thing, we use religious forms to hide the fact that we do not actually want to submit to God. So God exposes the truth directly. You are not irreligious. You are offering sacrifices to the demons you follow. Scripture uses an extremely severe word here, calling it unfaithfulness, a betrayal, a distorted covenant relationship. This is not only about ancient pagan rituals. It reveals something far deeper. A person can speak about God, yet in practice hand over the authority of life to something else. That is why God does not even allow people to privately decide how to offer burnt offerings, acts that appear to be entirely given to God. Because the issue has never been whether worship exists, but who determines its center and its form. Then God brings the focus sharply to one thing: blood. He says you must not eat blood, and his tone is more severe than before. I will set my face against the person who eats blood. Why? Because blood represents life, and life is not meant to be consumed. God does not say blood is disgusting or unhealthy. He says this instead: I have given the blood to you on the altar to make atonement for your lives. That statement is deeply unsettling. God is saying that humanity's greatest problem is not a lack of strength or energy, but a lack of restored life. Blood cannot make you live longer, but it testifies to this truth. Sin demands a cost, and life must be given. Even animals taken in hunting must have their blood poured out and covered with earth. This is not a meaningless ritual. It is a repeated reminder. Life is not yours. You only receive it temporarily. You may notice that near the end, God says that if someone eats an animal that died naturally or was torn apart, they are merely unclean and must wash themselves. This is not a contradiction. It actually clarifies the issue. The problem is not simply the outcome, but how you treat the authority over life. Not everyone who comes into contact with death must be cut off, but everyone who claims life as their own, excluding God, bears guilt. At this point, we must ask an honest question. If blood matters this much, if life must always be brought before God, how could any of us possibly stand? The answer does not appear at the end of Leviticus 17. It unfolds as the whole of Scripture moves forward, because one day, a life truly was brought before God. Not taken by force, not stolen, but willingly given. His blood was not consumed, nor handled carelessly. It was completely poured out, becoming the only blood that truly atones. In that moment, God did not turn his face against us. He allowed that one to bear the consequence alone, so that those who deserved to be cut off could remain. Leviticus 17 is not teaching you how to eat meat. It is asking a question you cannot avoid. Does your life belong to you, or to the God who gave it to you? And that question finds its true answer only in the Christ who shed his blood for others.